This is the Genesis GV60 Performance. This happens to be the 2024 model year. This car is in its second model year. It was a 2023 when it first was released. And I've spent the last week with this car. And I'm gonna tell you guys all about this luxury Ioniq 5 and why I think you might like it. So if you wanna know more about the Genesis GV60, then stay tuned. Hey everybody, it's the Ioniq guy. If this is your first time to my channel, I just wanna say welcome. My name is Corbin and I cover all things Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis EV related. Today, we're talking Genesis. And you might not know this, but this is actually my second go around with the GV60 Performance. Actually, last August into last September, I did have that car for a week. And I ended up not making a video about it because that car was released so close to the new model year that I just didn't see a point. But now we have the 2024, which has already been on the market for 4 or 5 months. So it's not necessarily 100% new, but it's new to me, and it might be new to some of you who watch my channel and are Ioniq 5 owners. So I'm not gonna bury the lead here. I love the GV60. I love most of everything with this car. Now, let me explain that. So I've been driving my Ioniq 5 for over 2 years now. Love it. It's a fantastic car, but it is not a luxury car. This car takes everything that I love about the Ioniq 5 and it just cranks it up to 11. The level of luxury that you get with the Genesis GV60 versus the Ioniq 5 is just so much better. And honestly, it's really not that much more expensive. For the 2024 model year, they introduced the new standard version of the GV60, which has the same battery pack, same charging capabilities, but it's rear-wheel drive instead of all-wheel drive, which was standard across all GV60s in 2023. And what that gives you is a 294-mile EPA-rated range, which is almost 50 miles more than the all-wheel drive advanced GV60 from 2023. So you can now get a GV60 with nearly 300 miles of range, which is really cool. Unfortunately, the GV60 really hasn't taken off and been a huge sales success in the United States. In 2023, they only sold a little over 3,000 of the GV60, and that's across all trims. So I think what they're doing with this new version is trying to broaden the appeal to get people who want that bigger range number that's closer to 300. In all honesty, when you see 248 miles of range on paper, it doesn't sound like a lot. And then when you start factoring in cold weather driving and winter range, you're probably gonna only see in the low 200s, if not high 100s in terms of range in those colder months. So seeing that big range value is gonna be a big help. We're not talking about the standard version today. Today we are talking about the performance. This is the high performance, kind of similar to the EV6 GT. Definitely not even close to the Ioniq 5N, but approaching it. Now I will say as your state of charge drops, that 0 to 60 time is going to drop considerably when in boost mode. So if you want to get that really fast 0 to 60, you do have to be in a higher state of charge. This color is called Atacama Copper. I really like it. From certain angles, I will say it does look kind of pink, which looks kind of odd, but right now sitting in the shade, it's definitely copper colored. It's definitely got that sparkle in it. It looks really nice paired with the chrome around the roofline as well as the glossy black plastic. I'm not usually a big gloss black plastic fan, but I think here paired with this copper color, it looks really sharp. I remember the first time that I saw the GV60 when it was originally announced, and at first I didn't really like the design, but after a couple years of seeing this car pretty often online, and now getting to live with it in person for a week, I really dig the design here. If you guys had seen my electrified Genesis GV70 video from last year, then you will know that I was a fan of that design language. It's a little more grandpa-esque, so to say, just more the swoopy lines, just not as sharp looking as the Ioniq 5. But for a luxury car and a luxury brand, I think this is the look that they should be going with, that more classy, kind of timeless design. I think this car is gonna age pretty well. I really like this car's proportions. The blacked out A-pillar gives it a really cool look. It just looks like a big C for Corbin. The split headlights look really cool. Obviously these headlights are all LED. I've tested them at night. They work fantastically. They're much better than the Ioniq 5s. You've got this big intake down below to let air in for cooling. The actual opening is pretty short, but they did make it false up to about here. You've got this splitter down low that's like a satin silver color, kind of emulates the color of the wheels and some of the other trim along the rocker panels. The car really does have a bit of a snout, so it kind of comes to a point in the front. I think a lot of people are gonna say this looks like a fish with its mouth gaping open, but looks good in my opinion. They kind of brought the Genesis logo down here to this little black triangle where the front-facing camera lives. And I think the chrome eyebrow actually kind of works for the car. Popping open the hood, you do have an easy to access latch there, and then you're gonna find a lot of black plastic cladding in here. You do have a similarly sized front trunk to that of the Ioniq 5 or the EV6. It does have the closing lid like the Ioniq 5. The Ioniq 6 now does have the lid that interfaces with the hood, so you don't have this lid taking up space and adding weight to the car overall. And then in here, you're gonna find one coolant loop. So unlike my Ioniq 5, there's no low conductivity coolant loop that needs to be serviced. Washer fluid reservoir, brake fluid reservoir, and that's about it. It's not a whole lot going on under here. They do make positioning the headlights really easy with these screws here that have holes that just tell you where to put the screwdriver and which way to turn it to adjust the angle and everything. Looking at the GV60 in profile, you are going to see that it does look shorter than the Ioniq 5, and that's because it is. This has about 100 millimeters shorter wheelbase versus the Ioniq 5, and all around it's a shorter car. And you'll see in just a second the effect that it has on the rear seat passenger space compared with the Ioniq 5. But other than that, the front seat of the GV60 is actually bigger than the Ioniq 5. If I actually go ahead and move the front seat all the way back in its tracks, I can almost barely press the accelerator pedal all the way down to the floor. In the Ioniq 5, I can definitely reach it, no problem with the seat all the way back. So if you're a really tall person, I think the GV60 is probably even a better option for you. But here's where you're gonna see where it's lacking. So with that seat set for me at 6'2", sitting behind myself, you can see my knees are practically into the back of the seat. I do have a bit of a gap between my thigh and the seat too, so honestly, it's not gonna be a really comfortable road tripper for somebody my height sitting in the back seat. Footroom under the seat is not great either. I can barely fit my toes under there. But if I just angle my legs out just a little bit, I am a little bit more comfortable. If the driver were able to move the seat forward 2 or 3 more inches, I could actually be pretty comfortable back here. Now with the front passenger seat adjusted for somebody of a more reasonable height, I actually have pretty decent knee room. I've got maybe 4, maybe 5 inches, which is pretty good. And a little trick about the GV60 is on the side of the seat here, just like with many new Hyundais, you do have switches. You can move the seat forward, backward, you can tilt it if you want. You can really have a fun time tormenting the front passenger. And just like with the Ioniq 5, this car does have a very easy step-in height, and it does have the feature when you power off the car, it will move the seat back when you open the door to allow for easier egress. Now on the topic of seats, just like with the GV70 that I already reviewed, this car has incredibly comfortable seats. They're a nice, soft Napa leather, and they have so many adjustments. They have massaging, they have heating, cooling, 2-person memory, adjustable side bolsters, adjustable seat bottom, adjustable thigh extension. I don't know the number off the top of my head how many adjustments there are, but there are a lot. And just like with the GV70, I am more comfortable driving this car or that car than any other car I've ever been in. The steering wheel must also be Napa leather because it has a very soft feel to it. It's got a little bit of cushion. It feels really nice. I know a lot of people aren't big fans of the light colored interior, but this performance trim can also be had with that really cool looking sport themed interior. I'll throw in some footage here because that's the version that I had last summer. It had some really cool light green stitching throughout the cabin, just all around a really cool looking interior. One of the GV60's more distinct design elements is going to be this chrome Z that runs along the C-pillar of the car. It's kind of like their own Hofmeister kink that BMWs are known for. I think it would be cool if they started implementing this in other Genesis vehicles. This looks like it might be a small little cornering window, but it's not. It's actually just a black solid piece. Something that the GV60 has that's really cool that I hadn't tested on any other car before is the camera with facial recognition to get into the car. So I don't have it activated on this car, but when I had the GV60 last year, they did activate it for me, and it actually works really well. All you gotta do is just walk up to the window, it recognizes that you're standing there, you look at it for like a split second, and then it says, okay, you are who you are, go ahead, open the door and get in. And there's also a fingerprint scanner in the car that you can use for starting it as well. So this car really is truly keyless. Now on the topic of the key, here's one of my first gripes with this car is the key fob. It feels cheap, it doesn't feel high quality. I hate the button placement along the side. It's impossible to feel where something is when it's in your pocket. I know they put the little dots onto the lock button so that you can find it when it's in your pocket, but it's not always the easiest thing to feel. I much prefer when you have a key fob that has the buttons on the top and they're all laid out in one single layer. You don't have to go hunting down either side. So I'm just not a big fan of this key fob. And also, I don't like the white color. It just shows grime. It looks dirty. It would be cool if they color coordinated it with whatever color GV60 you did get. And that brings me to another gripe with the GV60 is the fact that when I walk up to the car, you can see how long it takes for the door handle to pop open. In my Ioniq 5, it happens much quicker. I don't know why there's a delayed reaction here, but it's just long enough that I notice it and it annoys me. Now, I will say it only really happens when you're coming at it from the back of the car. I will lock it again right now and show you coming from the front. So coming from the front now, you'll see that just about by the time I get to the door handle, it's popped open for me. So I don't have to stand there and wait, unlike when I come from the back. Another gripe I have with this car is it does not have the automatic locking doors when you walk away. But the good thing is that you can install my automatic door lock module with the GV60 via the trailer light wiring harness located in the trunk. It's really simple to do. All you got to do is pop off one piece of trim with a flathead screwdriver and then 2 screws with a Phillips head, and then boom, you just plug it into the trailer light wiring harness. After the last door of the vehicle is shut, it starts counting down from 10 seconds, and then at that 10-second mark, all the doors will lock. So no more accidentally leaving your car open like I've always done with my Ioniq 5 until I installed the automatic door lock module. You can check that out at ioniqguy.com. I have dedicated instructions for the GV60 and a link down in the description if you're interested. Something I do really appreciate is lighted door handles. They make it really easy to find. And then you do have puddle lamps that project the Genesis logo down to the ground from the mirrors at night. It's a really slick look. These mirrors are also electrochromatically dimmed, so when you have cars behind you at night, just like your rear view mirror, these also show dimmed lights so they're not blinding you as you're driving. So here in the back of the GV60, you've got the same split tail lights. You can see them if I lock the car and unlock it as well. Now this car does have some Prius in it. And the reason I say that is because this spoiler actually splits the glass in the back here. So from the driver's seat, this is a floating spoiler just in the middle of this glass panel. You have a view at the top, a view at the bottom, just like in the older Priuses. Then to get in, simply press the button down below. And you're greeted to a decently sizable trunk space. It's a little smaller than the Ioniq 5. I'd say it's on par with the EV6. It's got a much more sloped roofline like the EV6, but it's still plenty usable. Unfortunately, the subwoofer in this car, though, takes up less space under the floor here, and it's located in that corner. So you actually do have more usable underfloor trunk space versus the Ioniq 5 Limited with the big subwoofer that takes up like this entire section under the trunk. The sub trunk actually has a cool little trick where you can open up this little flap here and gain access to some smaller stuff without having to lift up the entire thing if you've got a lot back here. So kind of cool trick there. You've got some cargo tie downs in the corners, and then what's really nice, 2 LED lights, one on each side. It really illuminates this area really well in the dark. You also have a 3-position cargo cover back here. So if you want to recline these seats more, you can do so and not interrupt the use of the cargo cover. And then back here, you've got a simple 12-volt, 180-watt outlet. Close her on up. But like I was saying with the front, I do really like their use of color on the exterior. You've got grays, you've got blacks, you've got reds, you've got golds. I think it's a really good color palette with this car. So this car does have big 21-inch wheels. These are 255/40 R21s, so they're pretty big. Similar to the GV70 that I reviewed a few months ago, you do have these nice kind of gunmetal colored wheels. I really like the design here. Very angular, yet pretty simple looking. There's no inlays or anything with like black gloss or anything. They're just kind of a classy looking wheel in my opinion. So let's talk range and efficiency. So the EPA rates this vehicle for 248 miles in mixed driving. So I took this on my usual 48-mile loop that I do with every press car that I get, and averaging about 72, 73 miles per hour in about 60-degree temperatures, this GV60 averaged 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which would give it a theoretical road trip range of about 217 miles from 100% down to 0%. Now, you're never going to do that on a road trip. You're going to more likely be going from 80% to 10%. So using 70% of the battery pack, you're talking about 150 miles of range, which is honestly a little bit disappointing. I was expecting more, but this is the performance version. This is not the standard version with just rear-wheel drive. So this is going to be a little bit more thirsty. And when I tested the 2023 last August on the same route, at about the exact same speed, that one averaged 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour. So even still, this vehicle here for the 2024 model year shows a little bit of an improvement in efficiency. Now, that could be within margin of error from wind or air temperature or air density, so I'm not gonna look into it too much. What's interesting is the electrified GV70 actually beat both of these. Now, that is not a performance car to say. It still goes 0 to 60 really quick, around 4 seconds, and that GV70 averaged 3 miles per kilowatt hour on the exact same route in 83-degree temperatures. And that car all around is a much larger vehicle than the GV60. So also kind of surprising there. But again, that could be within the margin of error related to exterior factors. So this isn't going to be the best road trip vehicle if you just want flat out efficiency. My Ioniq 6 SE rear wheel drive is going to obliterate this on a long drive. But anyway, I would love to spend some time with the standard version of this car to see what you can actually get with that on a highway road trip. Of course, being a modern Hyundai, it's going to have Smart Park. So you lock the car, you hold down the remote start button, powers the car on, and then you got your buttons here to control forward and reverse. So you just hold down the button and the car will start driving forward. Let's see what happens if I try and get in its way. Stopped. Now it senses I've moved. Is it going to turn? Yep, it's turning the wheel. It doesn't want to kill me. That's surprising. So I think that about does it for the exterior. Let's say we get inside and check out the interior. So getting in and powering up the GV60 is a much different experience than the Ioniq 5. It is much more just opulent in here. All the finishes feel really nice. You got soft touch materials, you've got suede, you've got these metallized finishes with this cool pattern and texture on it. Just looks really nice. Just like with the electrified GV70, Genesis's design language encompasses ovals. So you have an oval here around the HVAC controls and the radio controls. You have an oval on the handle for the glove box. You have circles here for the door releases. The air vents are ovals. So it's a little toned down in regard to ovals versus the GV70, but they're still there. And whenever anybody gets in this car, the first thing they're going to notice is that when you power it on, the orb here flips over and it reveals your gear shifting knob. It's just such a cool presentation. I've never seen that in another car that I've ever been in. I showed this car to my mom the other day and she just thought it was so cool. I'm a huge fan of having hard buttons here for both the 3-level heated and 3-level ventilated seats, as well as heated steering wheel, auto hold. This car does have the 360-degree view camera system, so you can pull that up real quick, and then the parking sensor button. It's really similar to the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6 in the fact that they have mostly all the same buttons. They're just laid out a little bit differently, but one of the big changes versus either of those cars is going to be the fact that for the infotainment system, you have this control knob here, which allows you to just scroll through things. You can knock over to things. You have a back button, a home button, a menu button. All these buttons down here allow you to just sit back. You don't have to reach forward, even though I could reach it no problem with my long freaking orangutan arms. But for somebody who's a little bit shorter, who might not have as easy of a reach, they can use this control knob down here. It has a touchpad on the top. You can draw letters to input into the system, although I found it to be pretty finicky, so I personally would never use it, but it is there if you do decide you want to. At nighttime, you've got a lot of nice ambient lighting throughout the cabin. Looks really good. You kind of have like this pistol grip here, where the button would be your mirror controls, where you can fold them, you can adjust them. All the switchgear in here just has a very high quality feel to it. And like I said, the fact that this car starts at 52 grand, I mean, that's Ioniq 5 SEL territory. That's not even limited trim. So the fact that they're giving you any amount of this at 52K is kind of shocking. Now this performance trim is closer to about 70,000 with all the bells and whistles. This has every feature. So yeah, you're paying a lot more to get that stuff, but at $52,000 for the rear wheel drive, I think that is a great deal. And they have some really good lease incentives on Genesises right now. So check them out on their website if you are interested. One of my favorite features of the GV60 is something that the Ioniq 5 had in other markets, but didn't come to the US, and that is the glove drawer. It's just so convenient to just reach over, pull it open, grab what you need, slam it shut. I just really love that drawer. I really wish they brought it to the US. Unfortunately for the 2025 Ioniq 5 refresh, Hyundai did eliminate that even in other world markets. This car does have a full head-up display, really easy to see. If you have polarized sunglasses, you're not going to be able to see it as easily. So if you do buy one of these cars or own a car with a HUD, you're probably going to want to get a pair of non-polarized glasses so that you can see it better. But like I already mentioned, the driving position of this car is just so comfortable for me. Maybe it's different for other people, but I just find sitting in this car to be so comfortable. The seat massager's on, highway drive assist activated. I just drove home from work today and I had HDA activated on the car, and I only had to touch the steering wheel, I think 3 times over a 15-mile highway drive. You've got a really convenient charging pad right here that you can just drop your phone into. No USB-A's in this car. Every port is USB-C. I really like this floating center console design, and there's a couple secret storage spots here in the GV60 that you might not know about. So under here, you push this button, you get a drop-down bin. And you could easily fit a wallet in there, some valuables that you kind of want hidden and out of sight. If somebody got in this car, they would likely never find that spot. So that is a cool little storage nook. And then right in the front nose of the center console, there's a little slot where you can go ahead and slip some credit cards in. I personally would never use it, but it does exist. You do have another small storage here under the armrest. The armrest does not slide forward or backward, but it is fairly long. It's pretty comfortable. It's nice and padded. So when I sit back, got my elbow there, doesn't hurt whatsoever. Couple decent sized cup holders, but because you can't fit a big, massive 40-ounce water bottle in these, like a lot of people like to carry these days, I do 3D print these cup holder enlargers. You can see here, it does accommodate a big 40-ounce hydro flask. Nalgene's fit as well. And then you can still fit a normal-sized water bottle in the center. Also available at ioniqguy.com. For the climate control here, you do have a small little helper screen, which allows you to change the direction that the air is flowing. You can select driver only, you can turn the heat on, the AC on, and then you have toggles on the ends for adjusting temperature. I do really appreciate having dedicated HVAC controls. I just think it's something that you should have easy access to. Now, in regard to the sound system, you've got 17 speakers, 1400 watts, Bang & Olufsen. It sounds fantastic. Music just sounds great in here. Podcasts sound really good. You have like a surround sound setting that just makes it feel like you're in the center of a room listening to people podcasting. Just a great sounding system, especially compared to my Ioniq 5. Another thing I really enjoy is the panoramic glass roof. So it doesn't open or anything, but you can go ahead and close the shade if you don't want to get sun coming down on the top of your head. My bald head is susceptible to getting burnt, so sometimes I want to close it if it's feeling a little too warm, but it is tinted nicely, so it doesn't let through a ton of UV, so at no point did I feel like I was getting baked when driving this car in the sun, but some people might just want to keep that closed. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't add in 2024 is a digital rear view mirror. They added it to the Ioniq 5, and they are adding it to the refreshed EV6. And the fact that this car also doesn't have a rear windshield wiper just kind of leaves me asking, why not here? This is the luxury car. This should probably have it. And at first I wasn't a big fan of them, but as I've spent more time with them, I could see myself wanting it in a future vehicle. Another thing that people might not know about is in the passenger little pistol grip here, you can undo this little cover here. And you can actually put little scented pods in here to add some better aroma to the inside of your car, which is pretty cool. I was just kind of playing with the car one day, twisting that, and I found that out. So kind of a neat little trick there. You've got the paddles on the back for regenerative braking that we all know and love from other Hyundais and Kias. It's one of my favorite features about driving a Hyundai Kia EV is just being able to quickly adjust your regen on the fly. Most other automakers don't do that. Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis are kind of a unicorn in the fact that they give you so much granularity when it comes to how you drive your EV. Now I'm going to turn off the air for a second, and I want you guys to hear or not hear just how quiet it is in this car. You've got double glazed windows all around the cabin. Genesis really takes it up a notch from Hyundai or Kia in terms of cabin quietness and just comfort all around. It's so quiet in here. I'm watching cars drive by my house right now, and it's rush hour, so there's a lot of people driving by, and I don't hear any of them. And they're all driving gas cars. They're not all in EVs, so they're making noise, and I just can't hear them, and it's so nice. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the infotainment system here. It's basically just a reskinned version of that's in my Ioniq 5 or what's in the current EV6 or Ioniq 6. It just looks a little bit different here. They've got some photos. They've got some different colors. The layout is a little bit different. You have a home button here. You've also got a menu button here. So just a different way to operate the system, but it more or less is all the same features. We don't have BlueLink activated in here, so we can't look at that. I tested the route planning features. Same issues that route planning has in the Ioniq 5, where it doesn't allow you to say, I want to come to a charger with only 10% state of charge. It's planning a trip, and it has you charging the battery pack when it's still at 35, 40% state of charge, which is just a stupid way to drive one of these cars on a road trip. You want to be going from 80 to 10%, 80 to 10%, just hopping along as you get to your destination. So I don't know why that still hasn't been resolved. I don't know why it's not a setting that you can change. Genesis, if you're watching this, please talk to Hyundai, please talk to Kia. Let's figure out how to give us access to changing that number, because it's probably going to be the same for the new CCNC software system as well. So that's just something that really needs to be fixed and adjusted by the operator of the vehicle. I want to take some level of responsibility of how I am driving my car. Got plenty of left foot space down here, which is nice. There's a big dead pedal. I don't feel like it's pushing me in towards the center of the car at all. Even though the center console here is further forward than the Ioniq 5 and it's not as open here, my leg does rest on it, but it doesn't hurt my leg at all. It doesn't feel uncomfortable at all. I really don't mind it. I know a lot of you who own Ioniq 5s, you're really gung-ho about that big open space there for your knees, but I'll tell you here, it doesn't really bother me whatsoever. Your mirrors up here have lights that automatically turn on and off. You've got overhead lights that are capacitive touch activated. You got the switch for the sunshade. And I think that's pretty much everything for the front here. Let's check out the back seat real quick, and then we'll go for a drive and I'll give you guys my final thoughts. So hopping in the back seat here, you're gonna see the roof is scalloped here. So even me being 6'2", I've got maybe 2.5 inches of headroom here. If I sit with my head completely back, my head is touching the ceiling. So you can recline these seats if you want. So if I recline it a little bit, my head is still touching the ceiling, except when I'm leaning back, it's now my forehead that's touching the ceiling. But yeah, if you're over 6'2", you're gonna have a hard time fitting in the back of this car. You've got some sunshades here for the back seat passengers, which is always nice, especially if you have young kids. You don't want them getting too much sun. I already talked about the seat position and comfort. You do have an air vent here. You do have a nice view out the panoramic glass roof from the back seat here. What's kind of neat is you have this storage compartment here that's completely under the center console. You can literally throw a ton of stuff in there. You could probably fit a gallon of milk if you wanted to. And that passes through to the front. but I don't really know in what world you would be passing stuff to somebody in the front down low like that, but it's kind of cool. 2 USB-C ports. All the materials in the back seat are the same as the front seat, so really nice and padded, soft. You got the suede inserts here on the door panels. In the back here, you do have 3-level heated seats. You've got door unlock buttons on both sides, and then a big window, and obviously you can roll down your windows. You can see they're double glazed, and you can see they have this soft open function, so as it gets to the bottom of its travel, it slows down, and it does the same when it's going up as well. Because of the really tall hip line here, it doesn't feel super great to rest your arm on the window here, and it is a shorter window, so you do feel a little closed in the back here, but it's really not too bad. Coat hooks, lights, all the standard stuff. Adjustable headrests. Then you'll see here you've got a fold down armrest, and again, if your giant 40-ounce cup doesn't fit in it, which it's not going to, I do sell 3D printed cup holder enlargers here in the back seat, and these do accommodate your big 40-ounce bottles. Seat back pockets, they are the hard style, so don't put anything too delicate in there or it's probably going to get crushed. Then you'll see over here, there's actually a cup holder here on the door. Unfortunately, it really doesn't fit much of anything. You can see this is just a small 32-ounce, 3-inch water bottle, pretty bog standard, and it just barely slips into the top, and then it just kind of moves around, and obviously a 40-ounce is not even going to come close to fitting, but you could just throw some change in there, a Twinkie or whatever you want. You've also got the nice ambient lighting back here around the door pull or along the armrest here. Just so much nicer in the back seat here than in some other cars I've tested. This is a fantastic back seat if you're a smaller adult or a child, but unfortunately for larger people like me, I don't think it would be that great of a spot to be for way too long. That about does it for the interior of the GV60, so let's check out how it drives. All right, so we're here in the GV60. We're about to merge onto the highway. It is raining fairly lightly, so we'll keep our speeds down a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and activate Highway Drive Assist, and we'll test out how that works. I'm gonna set that to about 65. And we've got lane centering on, and everything is activated. I've noticed over the last week that Highway Drive Assist is really dialed in here. Obviously, you still need to pay attention and still treat it as if you are driving the vehicle, but it definitely lends a strong helping hand. I've noticed that the lane centering here is quite good. I did actually do about a 15-mile drive yesterday, and I tried to keep my hands off the wheel as much as I could, and I was able to go for about 15 miles and only had to touch the steering wheel about 3 or 4 times over that 15-mile stretch, so it's doing a really good job. I'm really impressed with it. I don't know if there's any major hardware differences or software differences between my 2022 Ioniq 5 and the Genesis GV60, but it does seem to perform quite well. So I do have the auto wipers engaged right now, and this is the first time I've really tested them. They seem to be working pretty well. I have driven the Genesis GV70 and they did not work that great for me in that car. I don't know what the difference is, but here they seem to be working pretty well. If I turn up the sensitivity, you'll see them going back and forth a little bit more frequently. Turn the sensitivity down and they should automatically stop wiping as much. Now I did buy a sound meter so that we can measure the sound levels in here on side streets as well as the highway. So high 50s, low 60s. We are only doing about 52 miles per hour right now. The rain is obviously going to add some noise, which is unfortunate. I wish I did this yesterday when it was a lot nicer out. I do have the car in comfort suspension right now. So this does have adaptable dampers. So it opens up a little valve and it adjusts the pressure in there so that the car can have a little bit more spring, or it can stiffen up when you go into sport mode or boost mode. So there's a fair number of potholes on this highway, this stretch of highway here, and it soaks them up pretty well. Now, if I go into sport mode, we'll see what that feels like. So in sport mode, I can definitely feel a little bit more of a sharpness in the suspension. We're about to come up on a pretty big bump in the freeway here where they did some patching, and I'll definitely be able to tell on that. So here comes that bump in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I felt that a little bit. So we're doing 70 now. Looks like about 66 decibels. Visibility in the GV60 is quite good. There's a lot of glass in the back of this car. Despite it not having cornering windows in the C-pillars, you still have a pretty decent view. Obviously, this has all the safety features you would want in a modern car. One of my favorite features with highway drive assist is the fact that you can separate adaptive cruise control from lane centering. So right now, I'm controlling my speed with the accelerator myself, and it is keeping me centered in the road on its own. Sometimes you just want to have a little bit more control, especially in heavier traffic where it's just kind of coming and going and coming and going. But we're gonna go ahead and get off the highway now, and we're gonna go on one of my favorite curvy back roads. So we're gonna drop down into I-pedal, which is like how I prefer to drive vehicles on side streets, and we've got it in comfort mode right now. And we'll check out what the sound levels are like here at lower speed. So here at about 36, 37 miles per hour. It's about 53, 54 decibels. Not bad. So yeah, all around, it's a very quiet car. You're not ever gonna be like, oh my God, it's so loud in this thing. Now, this car does have the ability, like the Ioniq 5N, to provide some audible feedback. So it pretends that the car is a dual clutch automatic, and it will simulate shifting, which I am okay with the shifting aspect, but the noise, I don't know. I kind of liked it in the Ioniq 5N, but I also kind of didn't like it. Just the silence is just so much more preferable for me as an everyday car user. I'm not a sports car driver. I'm not going out looking to rip it on the track. Just have a little fun every once in a while, but nothing too crazy. So we'll go ahead and put it in sport mode for these roads here. The steering, even in sport mode, is pretty numb. There's definitely no shortage of power. I mean, you can just hammer it on, hammer it off. There does seem to be a slight delay if you really put your foot down. It's like maybe half a second before it really starts to bring on the power. The suspension does feel great though. Flat in these turns, and with the active dampers, when you are on a rougher road, you throw it into eco mode or comfort mode, and it's gonna soften up a lot. Let's put it back into comfort here. Yeah, it immediately softens up. Great feeling suspension. Well done, Genesis. I know a lot of people say that about this car. Some people have said it's one of their favorite suspensions, and I totally see why. I'm not hearing a single creak or rattle throughout the cabin. You can tell that they've really spent a lot of time putting that foam tape on wiring and stuff, and made sure everything is nice and tight. Just so nice and quiet. Now this here is a pretty rough road that is a good test of what a rough surface is going to be like in this car. So I am in comfort mode, and it feels pretty good. If steering feel is something that's really important to you, I don't really think you're gonna be satisfied with the GV60 steering. Now we're gonna do something that I haven't normally done with my press vehicles. We're gonna go on a dirt road and just see how it handles kind of a really worst case scenario rough surface. So there's a little bit of washboarding going on here. Man, in comfort mode, you just barely notice them. But when I do put it in sport mode, we'll see what that feels like. There's a good pothole. Now this is by no means the worst of the worst kind of dirt road you would ever drive on. This is probably best case scenario because there's a lot of houses on this road, so they keep it pretty well maintained. So I'm gonna turn on now this VGS, which simulates shifting. So we're gonna play with that. I haven't tried it yet, but I'll let you know what I think. Honestly, I think it's probably gonna be pretty annoying. So I'm downshifting, and man, does it respond like you would expect. It's herky-jerky. Upshift, oh my God. This is so bizarre. So let me know down in the comments section, what do you guys think of all the fake noises and the simulated shifting in an EV? Now this road here is a little rougher. Even still, low 60s. So one of my biggest complaints with the way the GV60 drives is the tuning of iPedal. So iPedal comes on really weak in this car. So as you roll up to a stop sign, I'm used to in my Ioniq 5, I can get relatively close to a stop before I need to fully lift off the brake pedal. Here, you need to do it a couple beats sooner, which I'm really not crazy about. I would obviously get used to it after driving this car for any length of time greater than a week. So like right now, I just lifted my foot off, and if I don't put my foot on the brake, I would have absolutely gone right through that sign. So I'll put it in sport mode and just give it the benefit of the doubt. So I'm gonna lift off my foot, say now. Okay, I take back what I said. It does seem like it is tied to the drive mode. It did grab a little bit more aggressively there. Definitely more with how I prefer it would. And what's nice about this car is you have that custom drive mode where you can change those settings. So it looks like if you want to have the more aggressive iPedal, you don't really have much of a choice but to go into sport mode. In this My Drive mode gives you so many options. You can control the motor, the steering, the suspension, the electronic limited slip differential, electronic stability control. You can really make that mode everything you want it to be, except for stronger brake regeneration in iPedal. But overall, this vehicle is just a joy to drive. It's a very well-rounded machine. You have the power, you have the adaptive suspension, you have comfort with all the other drive modes. I just love driving this car. I wish my Ioniq 5 had a suspension as great as in the GV60, but if you are in the market for a car in this price point between Ioniq 5, EV6, and GV60, definitely test drive all three. The Ioniq 5 is definitely going to be a little softer. It doesn't have an adaptive suspension. The EV6 is a little more sport focused, and that also doesn't have an adaptive suspension unless you get the GT trim. This one here, I believe, has it across the board. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Those are my thoughts on driving the GV60. All right, so let's wrap up this review and bring it home. So as you've just seen, I have been gushing over this car. Sure, there's some things I don't like about it, but for the most part, there's a lot to love about the GV60. If you're a fan of the Ioniq 5 and you just want a more opulent interior, this is without a doubt the only car you should be considering right now. It's everything that the Ioniq 5 is, despite a little bit less interior space in the back and in the trunk area. But other than that, it's the Ioniq 5 but other than that, it's a luxury Ioniq 5, and I absolutely love that. I really wish this car were selling in higher volumes like the Ioniq 5 or the EV6. I think it's a damn shame. And I don't know if that comes down to marketing or pricing or what, because you are getting a fantastic car for the price here. Perhaps now with some of these lease specials that they're doing on the car, it'll bring more people into the Genesis brand. I did also just see recently that Hyundai just opened about 30 showrooms across the United States. So dedicated Genesis stores versus kind of the hybrids they've been doing with Hyundai dealerships. So now people are going to be able to go into a Genesis store, get the Genesis experience, which is going to be better than the Hyundai experience. I guarantee you that. And more likely to probably get a Genesis in the end. I love the way this car drives. The adaptive suspension is great. It's tuned really well. The acceleration here is more than anybody's gonna ever need on a daily basis. Corners really well, quiet. In my opinion, it's nearly a perfect EV. It's just held back by some software issues. Route planning needs to be improved to make the experience with road tripping better, and the GV60 could really use a more efficient powertrain. I know this is the performance trim, it has the most powerful motors, so it's not going to be the most efficient, but if they can keep making incremental upgrades to the drivetrain in terms of efficiency, it could really push this car to another level. I'm so glad that they added the standard rear-wheel drive version for the 24 model year. We don't really know what the sales figures are on it, so it's hard to say whether it's been a hit or not in the lineup. Now, if I didn't already have an Ioniq 5 and an Ioniq 6 in my garage, I would totally consider getting a GV60. I don't know if I would get the performance version just because I don't really need it. The Advanced with all-wheel drive would be plenty of power for me, and the Advanced has more than enough bells and whistles to keep me happy. So anyway, guys, that's gonna do it for today's review. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. Check out my store at ioniqguy.com for the cup holder enlargers, the automatic door lock, and I also have some merchandise with the Genesis GV60 charging indicator. You can get it on a t-shirt, a hat, a mug, whatever the hell you want. The link to that is also in the description below. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.